Would I be the a-hole for not telling my siblings about their true paternity and taking everything in my dad's will? I, 38, have been in contact with my dad and 2 younger siblings for many years. My dad always treated me like crap because he was convinced that my mom cheated on him, because she did, a lot, and trapped him into an awful marriage and that I was not biologically his. For my 13th birthday, my dad bought me a paternity test, and even though the test results came back that I'm indeed his, he accused me, or my mother, of sleeping with the test guy. Lol. I've also done an ancestry DNA test and also matched with all his relatives, so I'm pretty sure that, unfortunately, he is my bi-dad. I've known for a long time that my younger sister was not my dad's. When I did my ancestry DNA test, my sister wanted to get one too. My mom freaked out, admitted her indiscretion, and begged me to convince my sister that it was a waste of money and that she could just have a copy of my results. I did, because I thought I was protecting her and she was going through a rough time at the time. I recently got a notification about an ancestry DNA match. I looked it up and it looks like my brother's ex-wife got one of the kids for both my brother's kids. And lo and behold, my brother's kids only seem to share relatives from my mom's side. FYI, my profile uses a screen name, so she would not have recognized who I was. My brother and sister have been really horrible to me for years. Comments about how I owed their dad for him putting a roof over my head as a child, and how dare I accept items from their grandmother's estate, etc. I put up with it for years because they are younger, and honestly not that bright. I thought that they'd come around eventually. My dad made sure in a drunken fight with my mother to give me a copy of his will, still have it, so that I knew that he had put a stipulation in there about his estate being divided amongst his biological children. I know that he has not changed his will since, because his mental capacity has changed. Too much info. Would I be the a-hole if I did not tell my siblings and just let this play out at the will reading? Take everything and kick them out of the family home. I would also be setting up funds for my nephew since my loser brother doesn't pay child support. My husband thinks that this is stooping to their level, as they both rely on his estate currently for survival, so this will ruin them. But they have no education or way to support themselves currently. But I kinda want to stoop. Now for the top comments. Stoop, stoop, stoop. Seriously though, not the a-hole. Your half-siblings sound like entitled pieces of work. Also, you didn't write the will, so I think I just have to leave it as it is, and it will stoop itself. My sister will likely be the one to push the DNA test. She's threatened this before, in an effort to increase her share and cut me out. So she doesn't know about your DNA test? Then I would sit on it. And when she pushes for a DNA test, agree as long as everyone is tested. A great example of fool around and find out. She believes that at 13 I slept with a test guy to get a favorable result. If you don't follow the will, you would be the a-hole for not following his wishes. He knew what he was doing by specifically adding biological. Technically, I think this is the exact opposite of what he thought he was doing, since it sounds like the dad thought Opie wasn't his bi kid, but the others were, when in reality the opposite is true. But yeah, follow the will and take everything. Your siblings sound like a-holes. Not an a-hole considering how they treated you. If this was only about your father and they hadn't treated you any differently, then you would be in the wrong. They both rely on his estate currently for survival, so this will ruin them. They have no education or way to support themselves currently. How is this your fault? What would they do if the roles were reversed? The way I look at it, they already showed me what they would do. Currently, they think that I am the one that is not biologically his, and they used this to keep me from acquiring items my grandmother left for me when she passed. Not overly valuable, but sentimental to me. Next story. Am I the a-hole for not coming back home when I got kicked out? I, 20 female, am living with my parents and trying to move out for the past year, but I've never found a good time to tell them. They were too busy or not happy that day. I'm the second oldest of 7. I work 50 hours, take care of the kids in the home, and try to have friends. I argue with them when I want to go out, don't want to do something with family, or want to be alone. 1 week was exhausting for me and I needed a break. They wanted me to work out with them, something we like to do as a family. I was sore already and was going to work all weekend, so I said no. They said I had no choice, and I said, no, I do have a choice. I'm not doing it. My mom took my phone, which I own completely, and said I was disrespectful, disobedient, and have to do what they say because they're my parents. When they finished working out, they talked to me. I said the same thing. They still weren't happy and said I was disrespectful and I have to listen to them. I just kept saying the same thing. When my older brother, 27, got there, I told him what happened, and when the argument started back up, he jumped in and called them out for not respecting what I asked and just stood for me. That made them madder. They said he had no place saying anything and told him to leave and not come back. My dad turned to me, asking me why he would do that, and I said he repeated everything I already told you and you guys weren't listening to me, so he stood up for me. My dad grabbed my keys, threw them at me, and said, "You don't have a job. I work for them. And don't come home." Then he left. My mom wouldn't let me leave and took my keys from me. I own this vehicle completely. So I called my brother from my work phone, asked him to pick me up, and I left. We went to his place and were there for a few hours when my mom showed up and begged me to come back home. At first I said no, that I was kicked out. But she kept begging, so I said I'll only come to get my phone and my keys, but I'm not staying because Dad kicked me out. We argued more, but finally she agreed. I got my things and went to leave, but my mom stopped me to ask for 5 more minutes to talk, and I said no, that's not what we had agreed on, and she kept begging, so I agreed. We talked but went back to the same argument that I spent an hour trying to leave. I had tried to walk out, but she blocked me. Then my dad came out and told me I can't leave. I said, "Yes, I can. You kicked me out." He then apologized and said, "I didn't mean it. I was mad at your brother." I said, "That's not okay. I really don't want to stay here anymore. I'm gonna go and I'll come back to talk in a couple days. I need to think and figure out exactly what I want." Finally, my dad let me go. But then the next day was my little brother's baseball game and I went to watch. Both my parents talked to me. My dad said, "I understand if you don't want to work for me anymore. I don't blame you, but please think about it." My mom begged me to come back home, and I said I don't think that's going to happen. I really need space. Am I the a-hole for not wanting to go back at all? Add on. I have been staying with my brother and I'm actively applying to apartments. Not the a-hole. Move out. This. Also, parentification is illegal. If they are turning you into a third parent for your siblings, then that just isn't right. It's mistreatment, but oftentimes isn't illegal. Illegal and immoral aren't the same. She's 20, not 6. If she was 6 and being left to care for the kids, then yes, it's illegal, but not when she's older. Well, your parents are toxic AF, and you need to get far away and find a job that is not working for them. Also, if you were their employee and had been getting paid legally, not under the table, then you being fired could be improper dismissal potentially based on labor laws where you live, allowing you to go to a labor board over it. Completely agree. Also, they may need OP to actually do the work. Also, all that free childcare they lost. OP is just being used and is far better off without them. You need to move out on your own. These are control tactics they're using, which is fairly abusive and not okay. They're not respecting your boundaries, and they're not treating you like an adult. It's time to move out and figure out what kind of relationship you want with them. I would strongly advise not going over to their home anymore and stick to neutral territory where they cannot take your keys and phone. These people just want their slave back. She needs to move out, get a job that has nothing to do with her family and leave them to sort out their own babysitting. Jesus, of course not the a-hole. They stole your property, try to physically prevent you from leaving, also a crime, and sound toxic, controlling, and possibly abusive. I'm really happy you got out safe and got your belongings back, but please do not go back to that house. It won't be safe, and since you've already left once, they may very well be more severe in their effort to prevent you from leaving next time. Stay with your brother, get a new job, and enjoy your freedom now that you're out and safe. There are also a number of support subs here that can be helpful with what you're going through. Next story is titled, "Am I the a-hole for not paying off my sister's BMW?" About a year ago, my sister Gina, 23, bought a BMW she couldn't afford. She also had a bad habit of getting expensive items for TikTok and Instagram posts. I lucked out of hitting the jackpot with my wife and job. My wife typically makes a lot more money than I do, but she's currently on bed rest with a difficult pregnancy. It has been almost 2 months, but it will last the rest of the pregnancy. She has inherited aplastic anemia. While we have some savings, we live within our means with 2 paid-off cars and a nice 2-bedroom house. My dad, who speaks English as a second language, calls me upset that someone is trying to steal my sister's car. It was being repossessed for non-payment. I called my sister and asked what was going on. She first said she was 1 month behind, then admitted she was 3 months behind. She said she would have the money next week. She never called a car dealership to follow up, and the car was sold. sticking my sister with the remaining balance. Now she doesn't have a car and is driving my dad's older Jeep. I have even offered my car for her to use, but it's a Toyota and she rejected it. Now she's been harassing both my parents because she says I could have lent her the money, and my wife is lazy about her pregnancy. Now I'm getting unwanted advice about getting my wife back to work since she has worked from home previously. My wife is sick. I'm already worried about her health. She's losing weight around 6 months and isn't eating well. My sister has told me our mom had 7 kids, and my wife is milking the pregnancy for attention. At this point, I cut my sister off and stopped going to my parents' house where she lives. A few family members think I am the a-hole for not helping my sister financially with a car that she couldn't afford in the first place. Now for the comments. Your sister sounds like an entitled brat. You do not owe her anything. Her lack of concern for your wife and her unborn niece/nephew is incorrigible. She's an adult now and needs to start acting like one. OP, you need to put your wife and unborn child first. That means blocking all of them completely until, well, after your wife and newborn have had plenty of time to recuperate. Not today, Hall, obviously. How does your sister have the nerve to suggest that your pregnant wife should work so you can give your sister money? Just curious, how many hours per week your non-pregnant sister is working? If she needs money, perhaps she should get a second job. She's in school and works in a high-end store part-time. Great. She should live within her means and not try to make her family into wage slaves. Not today, Hall. You're a good person for sticking by your wife, and your sister is an entitled child who is in for a rude awakening. When adults buy things they cannot afford subsequent payments on, this is what happens. The family members who are behind her are enabling this entitlement. I've been with my wife since college, and it has always pissed my sister off, and some other family members, that my wife hasn't learned Spanish in the 7 years we have been together. My wife is also English, so her English is not always the same as Americans. My mom doesn't speak any English, so it's just been somewhat difficult for my wife to communicate with everyone. Translation can be messy. Now for the last story. Am I the a-hole for saying my brother's girlfriend isn't welcome here because she was pushy about my wife breastfeeding? I'll keep this short and simple. My wife has pernicious anemia and her body can't absorb vitamin B12. Even if she ate a bunch of food full of B12 or an entire bottle of supplements, it would make no difference. She has regular B12 injections to make sure she gets enough. My wife is pregnant. She's being monitored closely because lack of B12 is not good for the baby or for her. Her due date is in 20 days, and her doctors have told her under no circumstances is she to breastfeed. They say the lack of B12 will cause harm to our baby. The situation. When we announced her pregnancy, my brother's girlfriend wouldn't stop asking my wife about breastfeeding. At first, she was not bad. She gave my wife 2 books about it, but she would not stop bringing it up when my wife explained she can't breastfeed because of her condition. She invited my wife to a support group for moms to breastfeed, called Triple L or something like that. She went as far as to give my wife's email to other moms she knows, so they could email my wife about why she should breastfeed, and give my wife printouts from the internet about a woman who had B12 deficiency and breastfed. That woman was a vegan, and she didn't have my wife's medical condition. My sister-in-law also apparently solicited for milk donations in our behalf, even though we never asked for it. We wouldn't take milk from random strangers. There's no regulations or checks and balances where we live, so we have no idea what was in the milk. We asked her to stop it, but she wouldn't. The last straw was her having these donors emailing my wife after we asked my sister-in-law to stop. I understand she's passionate about it, and it worked for her with my nephew. But she isn't a doctor, and neither are the people emailing my wife. Since she wouldn't stop when I asked her, I told her she's no longer welcome in our home. My wife made a new email address, and we are going to listen to actual doctors. My brother's girlfriend actually said the doctors don't know what they are talking about, which is so out there I can't even. My brother reamed me out for speaking to his girlfriend harshly, and he says I owe her an apology. For the record, he backs up what she says, and thinks my wife needs to listen to her. His girlfriend is mad too, and thinks our baby is unfortunate because of all this. I get she was trying to help, but she went way over the top in my humble opinion. Not today, home. A baby with severe B12 deficiency can have permanent brain damage. I would trust the doctors who understand your wife's condition more than a bunch of random internet articles. What you said is exactly what the doctor said. They gave examples of case studies for us to read to make sure we understood, and they are meticulous about my wife's blood work to ensure all is well. The last thing we want is a problem like you described. I had to leave a breastfeeding support group for this reason. Activists telling a mom to ignore doctors and not give formula to a baby with a jaundice, which also cause brain damage. They're just so awful. I hope your wife is okay emotionally, and you both know formula-fed babies are perfect too. She wasn't trying to help. She was trying to control your wife. I wouldn't speak to her again until she apologized for violating your privacy and emotionally mistreating your wife. My wife breastfed and joined a bunch of groups. Even she said it gets cult-like with the mothers in these groups. You guys have to do what's best for you and your baby. As long as the baby's healthy, breast or formula, you guys do you. I noticed the changes when my sister-in-law had my nephew. She breastfed him until the age he was old enough for school, but he was homeschooled so it worked out for them. She learned lots of things from these other moms that my wife and me disagree with actually. Yeah, my wife and I agreed as long as our daughter was getting the nutrients she needed to thrive, she would breastfeed. My daughter stayed on a boob a little longer than expected, right around 2. But once she found pizza, she no longer wanted breast milk. Lol. Triple L is La Leche League, and they can be militant. I personally have seen them harass parents for buying formula and do nurse-ins at the offices of doctors who have the gall to offer a quieter and more comfortable nursing area than a waiting room full of sick kids. You're not day-hall by any means. You're standing up and protecting your spouse and soon-to-be little one during a very emotional and scary time. Fed is best. 100% doesn't matter if it's breast or formula. Fed is best. First story is titled, Am I the a-hole for telling my wife that her problem with our daughter and son-in-law is her problem and not mine? Pretty much the title, but some background story first. My wife, 60, and I, 63, have 7 children. 35 male, 33 female, 29 male, 23 female, 20 male, and 20 female. I only listed 6 children because one child died when she was 3. She would have been 28. After she died, my wife and I got into our own deep depressions. I threw myself into work. My wife found other ways to deal with her grief and started a short affair with a man. They broke it off when I found out, and I took her back. We decided to try to be a family again. But my wife found out she was pregnant with 23 by this man. I decided to raise the child as my own as the father was not ready to be a father. He was only 19 years old at the time. 23 always knew she was a little different. We all have brown hair and she's blonde. But we didn't tell her the truth about her biological father until she was 18. She was surprised and upset, but eventually accepted it. I was always close to her, and even though it was rough for a few years, we're closer than ever. My other daughter, 33, started dating a man, Jack. This turned out to be 23's bio dad. Before it gets weird, keep in mind he and 33 are only 10 years apart in age, and is closer to her age than ours. They eventually ended up marrying. Been married a year now. I'm only human, so I admit I did have a problem at first, but I've come to accept it. He treats my daughter well, and they have a lot of common interests. Eventually, 23 and I ended up telling the family the truth about her parentage when 33 started dating Jack. Everyone was weirded out at first, but did come to peace with it. The problem is my wife. Since 33 started dating Jack, my wife has yelled and screamed at her to break it off. I hardly see 33 anymore because when she visits, my wife starts shouting at her that what she's doing is wrong. Personally, I don't see anything wrong with it. He was a dumb kid who made a mistake. I haven't seen my daughter since Thanksgiving, and I told my wife I was going to go play mini golf with her this weekend. My wife was furious with me. She was upset that I would not cut 33 out of my life, cut Jack out, spent time with 33 among other many things. I told her she was being angry for no reason, and if she has a problem with them, then it's her problem and not mine. She called me an a-hole and is not speaking to me. I'm sleeping in the spare bedroom. I wonder if what I said was too harsh. Maybe I should have supported my wife in her anger, but I honestly cannot see how her anger is justified. She's literally the only person who has a problem with this, and she's the one being aggressive towards our children and son-in-law. I tend not to agree with aggressive people, but what does everyone else think? Now for the top comments. On the one hand, I do find it kinda gross that one sister is dating her other sister's dad. But you know what else is kind of gross? Cheating on your grieving husband and the father of your children with a barely legal teenager when you're 35. So, glass houses and stones and all that. The most important people in this are 23, 33, and Jack. They're all okay with it, and that's what matters. And just because she doesn't like it doesn't give her the right to dictate your feelings on the matter. Yes, you're married, but you're still your own people. Not an a-hole. I too always thought 23 and 33 were the most important people in that situation. And my wife and I were always just peripherals. Obviously, she sees it differently. I gotta say, you're probably the most zen dude I've seen here. You approached and came to terms with some very emotional, heavy situations with calm, rational, non-selfish approach, which is something not that many people in general are capable of. All in all, even if you were harsh, you spoke the truth, and you didn't do it from a position of maliciousness, but rather not caving into consequences of another person's actions. So, firm not at a-hole, in my opinion. Keep up the good work. Your kids have a great father. Not at a-hole. It's normal you want to maintain a relationship with 33. The whole situation is a mess, but you seem to try and make the best out of it. I assume your wife is projecting her feelings of guilt, and seeing her son-in-law keeps that guilt present. But that's an issue she has to work through. I really wish she would seek some help, like therapy. She went after we reconciled, but that was over 20 years ago. I think she never went again. Not the a-hole. What a freaking mess. But honestly, if 23 and 33 and Jack are all fine with it, then okay, I guess. Your wife needs to face the music and let the whole family just move on. That being said, it is really weird that he somehow found 33 after an affair with your wife. Like, that doesn't seem at all like a coincidence, and it's very strange. Maybe not wrong, but strange. I thought it was strange too. I also kept questioning if it was a coincidence, but eventually I let go of my conspiracy theories. Lol. How they met was he came into 33's bank for an auto loan. It went from there. Now for the next story. Am I the a-hole for calling my wife a helicopter mom after she called the place my son applied at? My son James just turned 16 this month, and he decided he wanted to start working a part-time job, just to have some extra spending money and to start saving up. He hasn't had much luck. I doubt many places are interested in hiring a teen with limited hours to work. James started to get annoyed with my wife after he found out she submitted a few applications for him. We had a whole talk about that and reminded her that James wants to do this job hunting on his own. Over a week ago, James applied at this local clothing store he likes to shop at since he's familiar with the place. He was told the usual line when he spoke to the hiring manager. "We'll review your application and give you a call." He was really hoping to get this one, but after a week, he figured they were not gonna call. Earlier when I got home, there was some tension. James was locked in his room, and my wife seemed upset. I spoke to him first, and he told me my wife called the store earlier and berated the hiring manager for giving my son false hope and lying to him about giving him a call when they clearly weren't going to. James heard a call from upstairs because she was yelling, and when he confronted my wife, she said she was just angry on his behalf. That they should have called him anyways to let him know he didn't get the job. But obviously, they're only going to call applicants they actually plan to hire. He's angry at my wife right now for interfering, and now he's going to be too embarrassed to go to that store again since they know who he is. I also confronted my wife, and she kept saying she was only looking out for him. However good her intentions were, I told her she needed to stop being a helicopter mom here, or she would ruin opportunities for him by interfering. My wife went to our room and shut the door. James wants an apology from her for embarrassing him. My wife says she did nothing wrong, and is mad at me for calling her that. She said I was the one being an a-hole for not caring if our son finds a job, and it's not fair for me to criticize her when she at least gives a damn. With the way she's being right now, I have to ask if maybe I went too far and was an a-hole for calling her a helicopter mom. Now for the top comments. At least your son recognizes that his mother is way out of line. That saves you the worry that he will grow up to be weak and scared because of an overbearing mother. Not an a-hole. He needs to start putting his apps in without telling his mother where she can't call if she doesn't know, unless she has a tracking program on his phone. Shouldn't really have to live like that though, should he? Not an a-hole. What your wife accomplished is everyone knowing your son as the guy whose mom calls and berates the manager for not hiring the guy. What did she actually want to accomplish with her little shouting match? Angry on behalf of the son? Nah, that's a load of bull. She's actively interfering in your son's life, making her a helicopter parent. Absolutely agreed. My son is 13, He's been to all the camps at its local indoor skate rink. They pretty much promised him a job once he was old enough. Dude still has to go through interviews, submitting his non-existent resume. I'm not stepping in at all. He's pretty much been promised a position. I'm not involved. If little bruv mess it up, we'll talk. I cannot fathom the entitlement of any parent getting involved in their kid's attempts at being independent. Edit. Of course, I'll help him with interview techniques. Roleplay the interview. Help him make his resume. I just mean that I won't hold his hand / force this place to take him. Not day hall. One call from a parent will send any teen's application to the bin. She owes your son an apology and needs to step back. I think it is only fair if son would call her mother's workplace and berate her manager for making her work hard. She should have an easier schedule and more money. Agreed. Just jumping on this thread to leave a link to Ask a Manager, a website all about workplace behavior / norm / etiquette / etc. Alison Green gets questions all the time about helicopter parents, usually from the hiring manager who has to deal with them. And it never works out for the child who is being helicoptered. Ever. They never get hired. And if they somehow slip through and get a job, they're usually fired after their parent oversteps in their workplace. Not day hall. And your son will really suffer if your wife continues with this. Next story. Am I the a-hole for not canceling my doctor appointment and causing my husband's guests to leave? Me, female 26, and my husband, male 29, moved out of our hometown right after we got married. He's very close to his friends that he met from high school. He tries to use every opportunity to see them in person and spend time talking to them. He heard that 3 of them were visiting our city for 2 days, and they wanted to visit him the day before they leave the city. He was so excited. Prepared everything for their visit and stood at the door waiting for them for an hour. They arrived at 4. I made coffee and brought sweets so my husband could spend more time talking to them. Then he suddenly looked at the clock, which was 5 p.m., and told me to go upstairs so he could talk to me privately. My husband freaked out, saying he had an important meeting with a client via Zoom, and it'd take about 40 minutes for it to be over, and asked if I could stay with his guest till then. I reminded him I had an appointment with a doctor at 5:15 and couldn't skip it. He asked me to cancel it and stay with the guests. He didn't even want to hear my response, just rushed out for his meeting. I got dressed and went downstairs. I told his guests that my husband had a 40-minute meeting and I had an important appointment with a doctor. Told them they could wait or leave if they didn't want to wait. They chose to leave, and I went to my appointment. In 45 minutes, I got an angry call from him asking why I told his guests to leave instead of sitting with them till he was done with his meeting. Said he missed his friends and wanted to talk to them more. He said I always let him down and act unsupportive, although he always entertained my family when they came to visit. Truth is, he just loves spending hours talking to my brother because they share a lot of interests, so he wasn't doing it for me. He argued about how I was being negative and how his friends must have felt awful being kicked out like that. And he said I could have gone to my appointment 40 minutes later and explained to the doctor. But that's not how doctor appointments work. We argued back and forth. Everyone in the waiting room was staring at me because of how loud my husband was talking, till he hung up on me, then sends me a text with the word selfish in capital letters. I just couldn't stay. I've waited for a week for my appointment. I understand he misses his friends, but this appointment was important as I've been constantly dealing with an unbelievable pain and needed to see the doctor as soon as possible. I've been on medication, but it's not doing much. Just sitting in the waiting room is exhausting in itself, so it's not like I went out with friends. Not day hall. Does he seriously think you can show up 40 minutes later for a doctor's appointment and say, "Oh, sorry, I'm late. My husband had a client to meet with and I had to entertain his friends." How would it be fair to the doctor to cancel at the last minute when your spot can't be filled? Exactly. At this point, I really think he was being unreasonable. I don't know what other options he might have had, but to ask me to cancel my doctor's appointment is unreasonable. Besides, I'm not close with his friends, so sitting with them for 40 minutes would have been unpleasant. Oh my god. Not the a-hole. Even if he loved his friends, you weren't healthy. He was being selfish, OP. Not you. Horribly, horribly selfish. You waited a week. And pain that isn't managed by medication. Rescheduling or being late would have made your pain appear less severe. And goodness knows what could have gone wrong medically if you just ignored it for his buddies. Remember, you were in pain, and your husband called you selfish for not entertaining his friends when you could barely sit in a waiting room. You couldn't entertain, you couldn't reschedule. You can't get over that you're in pain for at least a week, and it's like, just be late to reschedule, and if you don't, you're selfish and unsupportive. That is cause for concern, I'm not gonna lie. What happens if you get sick? What happens if you have something wrong someday? An injury? He's not proving to be supportive now. Not Dayhall. His poor planning is not your responsibility. Not Dayhall. I have tried to consider how you might be in the wrong, and have concluded there is no logical way to believe that you are. Your husband should have gone down to his guests and explained he forgot his client meeting, and you had an appointment, and asked them nicely to stay. The way he handled it was rude, to not just you but also to them. Yep, if he had asked them, they could well have stayed. But his weird behavior of just disappearing and having his wife explain he'll be gone for 40 minutes is super rude. If I was a guest, I'd have felt I was imposing and left too. Nothing to do with Opie's behavior at all. Now for the last story. Am I the a-hole for adopting my niece and making my daughter share her room? My sister passed away last year due to cancer. We got at it at a very late stage, and it all happened so quickly over a pretty traumatic 4 months. My sister passed away so suddenly that none of us were really expecting it, and remained hopeful and somewhat in disbelief till the end. My husband and I love our niece, 6 female, like she's our own, and her piece of crap father was never in the picture. We definitely weren't going to let her go into the system, and decided to go ahead with the adoption process. My daughter, 18 female, is commuting to college from home to save on money. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment, and we told our daughter she's gonna need to share her room with her cousin. However, she's been angry, saying that it's not fair for her to give up her privacy, and that she needs her own space to get her work done, and that our place is crowded enough as it is. I told her she didn't really have a say in it, as she isn't even paying rent, and that she's being very, very selfish. Am I the a-hole? Edit. We can't afford a larger place, or we would have obviously moved. We've suggested our daughter study at the library or work part-time so she can pitch in on rent and we can move to a larger place, but she thinks both are unfair. No a-holes here. I think your daughter's concerns are legitimate, and I think you have done the right thing by your niece in a very tricky situation. It sounds like short of magicking a new larger home, there's not much any of you can do right now. You need to ensure that your daughter has a space to study. I'm so sorry for your loss. I don't know. The daughter is unwilling to consider a part-time job or studying at the library, refusing to make any kind of compromise in a very tragic situation. When I was 18, I was willing to do anything to get away from home, so things like working and getting my own place was not a punishment. I know my own history doesn't matter here, but it's the reason why I have a very hard time sympathizing with daughter. Not the a-hole. First story is titled, Am I the a-hole for not paying for my daughter's wedding after she went no contact with me? I paid college tuition for all 3 of my kids, 27 female, 29 female, 32 male, because I have the money and I wanted to. My older 2 studied computer science while my youngest one decided to study fashion design. I wasn't really supportive about the fashion design degree at first and tried to warn my daughter that the job prospects for it wouldn't be that great, but she was insistent that that was what she wanted to study, so I paid approximately $60,000 for her to get her degree. However, afterwards, she struggled finding a job in her field, and once she did find, didn't pay well. So she came back to me and asked me to help her get another degree. I told her I could help her take out a loan, but I wasn't paying. It caused a lot of problems between us and she went no contact. She ended up going to community college part-time while working as a server with the help of her boyfriend. I helped my older 2 pay for their weddings, and my youngest daughter recently got engaged. She started talking to me and her mom again, and we were excited about the wedding. However, she started planning for things way out of her budget that her older sister/brother were able to have at their weddings. Her mom and I were worried that this wedding would not be good for her financially and decided to talk to her about it. My younger daughter told us she thought we would pay for most of it and was planning on having a high-end wedding close to what my older 2 had. My wife and I told her we were not going to drop $30,000 to pay for her wedding after she went years of no contact with us. Furthermore, my older 2 paid for most of their own weddings. We just pitched in about $5,000 for each of them. They both make good money, well into the 6-figure range. My younger one got super angry with us and complained how it wasn't fair that her siblings got better things than she did and said we were playing favorites. Am I the a-hole for not paying for her wedding? Now for the top comments. Unfortunately, it sounds like she may have only tried to mend things so you'd foot the bill for her wedding. Not the a-hole. I was thinking the same thing while reading this. She only got back in contact with Opie just before wedding planning to make it seem like she wanted a relationship. But in reality, she wanted a wedding she couldn't afford and Opie can. It's also pretty baffling to me that she just assumed Opie was paying without even asking first. She thinks she's entitled to Opie's money. How does Opie know that she wouldn't go no contact again after the wedding? Or go no contact at any point in time when she asks Opie for money and Opie doesn't give it to her? Hopefully, if she ever has kids, she doesn't use them also as pawns to get money. If Opie doesn't stop her entitlement now, then who knows how far or how long this cycle will go on. Yeah, it looked pretty sketchy from what was said in the post, as it seems she got engaged, proceeded to get back in touch with Opie, and then ask them to pay for her wedding. Just doesn't quite sound right. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. You're being totally fair. Give her the $5,000 or whatever you spent on the other kids, and don't lose any sleep over it. If you do more than that, then you are not being fair to the older kids. Exactly. It's not favoritism if you've contributed an equal amount of all three. If she cuts contact again because of this, it's probably because she initiated contact solely for the purpose of funding her wedding anyway. Either way, not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. Sounds like she only initiated contact due to wanting money for wedding. I'd contribute the same $5,000 so that you continue to treat them equally. If the youngest can't deal with that, her problem. She sounds a bit self-entitled. Keep doing what you are doing, Dad. On to the next story. Am I the a-hole for walking out my hen party? Okay, so I'm 25 now. I got married last year, pre-COVID, and it was a perfect wedding. What wasn't so perfect was my hen party, bachelorette party. My small friend group planned it, and all I said was no strippers of any kind. It makes me personally uncomfortable, and I don't want them at my party. Fast forward to my hen party and everything's fine. We're at a club in my hometown and all of a sudden the music stops and someone starts talking through the speakers. I ignored it until they said my name, and I froze. I see this man walk towards me in a police costume, and I saw red. My friends booked a male stripper after I told them not to. He tried to handcuff me, but I pulled my hands away, but he continued doing his thing, taking his clothes off. I was furious. I walked out. I felt betrayed by my own friends. They did the one thing I asked them not to. I booked a taxi home and didn't speak to any of them for a while. They were spamming my phone with messages saying that I was being ungrateful and should have just enjoyed it, but I couldn't. It made me feel sick to my stomach. I get that maybe I should have just left calmly, but I was so angry and upset that I couldn't. I stormed out. My exit was a bit dramatic. But am I the a-hole for walking out? I only ask now as a Facebook memory came up for my hen party a few weeks ago. Now let's read the top comments. Not the a-hole. You had a hard no on the stripper. That there was one there, anyway, means it was a party for you. In name only. Also, they paid someone to actually harass Opie. It's not just a party thing. It's not like they put up a piñata after Opie said they don't care for piñatas, or buying a cake even if Opie isn't super into cake. Not the a-hole. They did the one thing you asked them not to do. Walking away was reasonable, especially since it doesn't sound like the performer realized you weren't into it at all. Right? It's not that hard to honor your friends' wishes for no strippers at their hen party. I have plenty couple for friends, and if they set hard limits on things they did or did not want, I made it happen. The party is to honor the bride, not to make her uncomfortable. OP, not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. Need to digress to tell this completely unrelated story. So I go visit, just me and my boyfriend, an aunt and an uncle in Chicago when I'm around 17 so I can see a concert and hang out with my aunt and uncle. At some point in the night, they're reminiscing about funny times with my mom and dad. They start talking about this time everybody got my mom a stripper for her 30th birthday. Suddenly, they realize they actually have this all on film on a VHS tape. They dig it out. So my mom is this really headstrong woman. And when she realizes the stripper's here for her, she's totally embarrassed and obviously beside herself. The stripper forces my mom's hands around his waist and handcuffs her hands and tells her she's going to have to work her way down so he can step out and she can get free. My mom is clearly out of her mind distressed. This goes on for like 5 minutes or so. My poor mom begging to be released and just shaking her head. But suddenly, you see her face completely change. It's like when the Grinch gets an idea. She suddenly gets all calm and gets this little smirk on her face. He starts pushing her down, and when she gets to her knees, she wiggles around so she's not facing front, and she bites him. She bit his butt. The stripper audibly screams and repeatedly shouts, "She bit my butt! She bit my butt!" I promise this was no love bite. I only watched it in slow-mo like 25 times, so I feel like I know. She viciously mauls this guy's behind, like goes at it like a freaking cobra bite. No immediate release either, like a pit bull, locked jaw that one. Stripper starts panicking and freaking out, and literally leaps out of my mom's arms. Needless to say, end of dance. Now let's read the next story. Am I the a-hole for respecting my 13-year-old daughter? So, I've never used Reddit before, but my oldest daughter, who thinks I'm an a-hole, wanted me to post this. I have 4 kids and these are fake names. Rose is 29, Ben is 27, Kate is 25, and then our lovely but very much a surprise daughter, Abby, is 13. My wife wasn't a great mother, I'll be honest. She was extremely immature and I shouldn't have pressured her to have kids. She had a strained relationship, especially with Rose and Ben, but she changed around the time we had Abby. She was certainly not the worst mother, but she was incredibly awkward when they were kids, and then they clashed as teenagers. Rose is not objective though, because she has always been jealous of her mother because people compare their looks a lot when she was growing up, and she had a boyfriend who would salivate over my wife. Ben is getting married, and I'm so happy for him. They really are perfect. My wife and future daughter-in-law do not get along at all, and my wife can be catty. My wife is not invited to the wedding, which I told her was her own doing, and she better not whine about it or think she's going to stop me from going. She really doesn't care and wouldn't want to go. The relationship with Ben is worse than the other kids. Ben still wants me and all of his siblings there, but Abby is refusing to go. She said that she isn't going to play happy family while her mom is being excluded. Abby is pissed at me for going, but I told her that isn't her decision. But I absolutely respect her decision not to go. Ben is upset because he wanted the whole family and says I should force her. I said she is too old to be forced, but he said what if she declared she wasn't going to school anymore? I mean, he does have a point. Abby is still a kid, but I don't think it is right to make her go. And I think Ben has to understand the consequences because he is free to not invite his mom, but other people are free to have an opinion. Rose is the one who wanted me to post because she also thinks Abby should be forced to go. Now for the comments. Everyone sucks here, except Abby. If your daughter chooses not to go because she doesn't like her mother being excluded, that's her choice. She has no obligation to play happy family. The fact that 2 of her siblings want to force her to go says a lot about why she doesn't want to. You're the a-hole for pressuring your wife for kids she wasn't ready for yet, and then being shocked at her less than stellar parenting skills. Your older children come off as petty as all hell. You're the a-hole. A person doesn't just cut a parent out for being catty. Something big had to have transpired in order for them to not invite your wife. I feel like there is more to this story. If it is that bad where you have taken his side, then yes, I would force the child to go. I would also have Ben and Abby sit down and talk before the wedding. I disagree. She is catty towards the bride. They haven't cut her out, and Rose and Kate are actually working on their relationships with her, but I wouldn't invite someone to my wedding if my wife expressed that they made her uncomfortable. Not the a-hole. Ben can't say he wants the whole family there while not inviting his mom. However, I think it's only fair to explain to Abby if she doesn't know why the mom isn't invited, and why it's important to Ben that Abby will be there. If she understands all of this and still doesn't want to go, it's her decision. And you should let her make this choice and explain to the other siblings that she made her choice and that you can't force her to go, because if you do, she won't enjoy it and make the experience worse for you and everyone else. Side note, try to make titles more objective. I understand you want people to be on your side, but you should really show the reason you might be an a-hole. I would use a title like, "Am I the a-hole for letting my daughter choose not to go to her brother's wedding?" Now, for the last story, am I the a-hole for telling my husband to just deal with my mom? My husband and I just had our first child 8 weeks ago, a beautiful baby girl. After she was born, I asked my mom to come stay with us for a couple weeks to help with everything because I had a quite traumatic birth and we are new parents. After those couple of weeks, I realized how nice it was to have an extra person to help with daily household stuff or to give one of us a break if the baby wakes up during the night. So I asked my mom to stay longer. I did this without talking to my husband about it, and pretty much just told him about it after I already asked my mom to stay. He was kind of mad about it, but I told him I was still recovering and he's just going to need to deal with my mom being here longer. I have 12 weeks of maternity leave, but my husband only had 6, so he recently went back to work. When he comes home, he will take over the baby duties, and he's great at giving her baths and getting her to sleep. It warms my heart to see how good he is with our baby girl. The problem, though, is that he shows me almost zero affection or attention. When I was pregnant, he would give me daily foot rubs and tell me how beautiful I am and how much he loves me. Now, I can barely get a good morning or good night out of him. His excuse is that he's tired from work and pretty much being on solo baby duty after he gets home. He told that he has a finite amount of energy and can't pamper me the same way anymore. The other night after the baby went to sleep, I asked him to give me a foot rub like he used to. He said he was exhausted and just wanted an hour to himself before he goes to sleep. He said I should ask my mom for a foot rub, but I said that's not the same. He told me he never gets a break between work and a baby, so I'm just going to have to deal with being lower on his priority list right now. I feel like that was a low blow to use my own words against me like that, but it got me wondering if I was an a-hole for making that decision unilaterally before. Am I the a-hole here? Now for the top comments. You're the a-hole for asking your mother to move in without consulting your husband first. It is his house too. Also, your mother helps you with the baby, and you don't work? But your husband works, then comes home to take care of the baby with no help at all? Then you ask him to rub your feet. As if he hasn't had a hard day with working and taking care of the baby with no help. Edit to add, before anyone says anything about the fact that she just gave birth, I gave birth in May and did perfectly fine with no help. Yes, it is very tiring being a mother, but that is what comes with the territory. Typically, I'm 100% team mom, but wow, this lady is an a-hole. I agree that it doesn't sound like she shares any of the baby duties when her husband gets home. Childcare is absolutely a job. It should be treated equally to her husband's out-of-the-home job, which means both of them work all day, and then share the night shift. Of course he's exhausted. And she just moved her mother in without talking to him? That's grounds for the, here's 2 business cards. One is a counselor, and the other one is a divorce lawyer. Take your pick. Move Reddit loves. What an a-hole. I'm flabbergasted at the level of a-holery here. You're the a-hole, sorry. First, making a decision that should have been made as a couple and doing it just by yourself. But info. You say your husband gave you daily foot rubs while you were pregnant and basically take care of your child solo once he gets home from work. When is the last time you gave him a foot rub or catered to him? To me, it sounds like he went from catering to you, now catering to the baby. Now you want him to do both, but who's making sure he's a top priority? Yeah, I recognize OP has healing to do, but it sounds like her husband could use some care just as much with his working as well. I am glad someone else noticed that. Your poor husband. Works all day to provide for the family, including your mom's living costs, and when he gets home, you and your mom clock off and leave him to do everything? And then you complain he is tired. You're the a-hole for days. That's what I got from this post too. When he gets home, it should be equal parenting. Not 2 people taking off and the husband doing everything. If Opie's mother moved in to help with the baby, isn't that the most opportune time for her to step in? You know, when both parents are burnt out. Then maybe that would help the parents spend a little time together to try to get their bond back. I know childbirth is tough. I'm due in March. But Opie seems to be neglecting that the father is affected by all of this as well. You're the a-hole. Am I the a-hole for choosing my little sister over wife? I, 29 male, have been married to my wife, 29 female, for 4 years. I have a little sister, 10 female, who lives with my parents. 2 months ago, my parents tragically passed away in a car accident. It has been very tough for my sister and I, but we are managing. I am the only brother, so I decided to take in my little sister and be her guardian. So here comes the issue. My wife and I already decided that we did not want kids. When I told her, she refused and said she did not sign up to be a parent, and we had already decided that. I told her I understand, but life is unfair and sometimes things happen that force us to do things outside of our comfort zone because it is the morally right thing to do. She said that I should put her in foster care or for adoption. I shut down that completely and told her the brother is still alive, so that's not happening. We continued talking about this several times, but she would not change her mind. So I finally told her I am doing it whether she agrees or not. She can either accept this situation or we divorce. And if she decided to go the separation route, I understand, because I am the one who broke the agreement about kids. She started crying and said that she chooses the second option. My in-laws called me after my wife went back to their house, and they started berating me about how I am an a-hole and bad husband, and that a good husband will always choose his wife first. I did not reply until they said that their daughter's tears are more valuable than my sister. That got me pissed, so I told them to go F themselves and hung up the phone. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for divorcing my wife to adopt my sister? Now for the top comments. At first, I was going with no a-holes here, but seriously, your wife suggesting you put your sister up for adoption or into foster care is just... I don't have the words. It's one thing to not want kids. It's another to be that heartless. It's great that you're taking your sister in, and I'm sure you'll find someone a lot better than your soon-to-be ex. Not stay home. Took their words out of my mouth, 100%. Seriously, the level of sheer selfishness and lack of empathy in that statement is absolutely mind-boggling. No one really signs up for this sort of thing. You just have to make the best you can of a horrible situation. I could not imagine being able to continue respecting a spouse who said something like that and stood behind it. Opie was actually far more tactful than I think I would have been able to be, and I am also a child-free person by choice. Not stay home. I don't want kids either, but when it comes to the family we have already, I would never stop my significant other from helping his sisters. One of them is living with us right now because her dad hit her. It isn't what I wanted. I am super introverted, but she is family, and I was immediately ready to take her in. We all hope someone will be there for us if something awful happens. Your parents died, and she is telling you to put your sister in foster care? That is callous and horrible to me. Life is what it is. We can't have everything we want, and we do not abandon family. I hope this isn't real because it makes me so sad. Yes, take care for your sister. Exactly. It's not like he is taking in some random child. This is his family, not the same as having a child. Sure, he will have to raise her, but it's nowhere near the same as having your own child. His wife freaking sucks. No a-holes here. It's unfortunate that your wife will not cave, but also her right to choose to be childless. Good on you to step in for your sister. It sounds like it will be beneficial for both of you at this terrible time. I am so sorry for your loss. She can go into foster care or be put up for adoption. Opie's soon-to-be ex-wife is a huge one for saying that. Next story. Am I the a-hole for revoking my husband's access to my bank account? My husband and I have been married for 3 years. We have 2 separate bank accounts, but both of us know the information of each other's bank account. My husband is working a good job, gets a lot of money. I'm currently in pregnancy leave, but I also have a good job as an optometrist. I also have lots of savings in my bank account. Recently, I found out my husband got money out of my bank account, around $3,000 to lend to his brother. His brother has a job, but refuses to spend his own money and expects his mom and dad to provide for him while he spends money on games and stuff like that. Apparently, my brother-in-law owed some people $3,000. And despite the fact he had that amount in his own bank account, he asked my husband for money. My husband not only gave him money, but got my own savings from my own bank account without asking me first. When I found out, I confronted my husband. Then he went to his parents and brother and complained about me confronting him. My in-laws called me and said I'm an entitled a-hole to make such a big deal over $3,000 since my parents are rich, and that amount is insignificant to me. They said their son needs it to pay off some loans, and I'm the a-hole for making my husband feel bad for helping out his brother. I revoked my husband's access to my bank account, and now he's saying I'm the a-hole and taking it too far instead of trying to resolve this another way. Am I the a-hole? Your husband has shown two major marriage-risking behaviors. 1. He broke your trust by stealing from your personal account. He didn't ask you if you'd want to help the brother. He didn't use his money, and he didn't even tell you what he did on his own. He knew it was wrong and did it anyways. 2. He sicked his family on you rather than deal with a problem with you directly. Not an a-hole. I think your marriage has hit a major crisis, and this should not be swept under the rug. Don't forget this gem. My in-laws called me and said I'm an entitled a-hole to make such a big deal over $3,000 since my parents are rich, and that amount is insignificant to me. There are a couple more problems here. 1. The enabling entitlement means brother is going to be a lifelong millstone around his family's neck. There will always be something he needs that the rest of the family will mobilize themselves into gathering for him. 2. The in-laws are gold diggers. They know Opie's parents are well off. The expectations of Opie bankrolling them are and will continue to be high. Not a a-hole. Maternity leave is when you are at your most vulnerable. There is a reason most women who are having babies get asked by nurses if they have a safe home environment. Your husband just told you that A. He'll help himself to your income without your approval. B. He'll help himself to your income while you aren't earning your normal wages, as in eating into your safety net. C. He won't let you raise issues and will walk out on you, and presumably your child, although it's not clear how long he was gone, if you take issue with his behavior. And D. He will get his family to bully you when you disagree. So Opie, is this a safe and healthy marriage? Not a a-hole. I fully believe that if you're married, you should be all in and combine your finances. However, part of that is making sure you are both on board with big layouts. What's big might be different from couple to couple. Like, I wouldn't consider $100 a big amount, but a couple living from paycheck to paycheck probably would. But I think $3,000 would qualify unless you're multi-millionaires. So he used a large chunk of money without you both agreeing, and for what I consider a stupid purpose since brother-in-law just didn't want to use his own money. He took the money from Opie's savings account. It wasn't his money to lend. Next story is titled, Am I the a-hole for fighting to gain my handicap-accessible house from my ex and her disabled daughter? I, 32 male, recently divorced my ex, 33 female, due to our coffee preferences. Despite having a solid marriage contract about property and finances, the court outright ignored it and awarded my family home to my ex. It's a 5-bedroom house, and I lived and maintained that I had modified for my then stepdaughter 16, who has a walking disability. Sure, I can afford to buy and build a house if I so desired, but I got that house from my father, who got it from his father. My parents are not alive, and I am an only child, so the house holds a sentimental value. Well, I lawyered up, fought in the superior court and won. And now ex and her daughter have to leave because they cannot afford the legal fees, and I am not willing to go into any settlement now that I know the kind of person I was up against. Problem is, my friends, extended family, and people who know about our family situation. They are calling me the bad guy for putting the daughter in a bad situation. Yes, our country does suck at making places accessible, and my house was the one comfortable place she could be at. I could give that house and make a new one or buy one, but because of the sentimental value attached to the house, I was unwilling. They doubled down that I offered no financial assistance to my spouse out of obligation for being a man. They're all giving moral arguments instead of legal ones, and I for one do not see myself at fault. Now the ex is uploading videos of her daughter on how terrible a place she has to live in. Now that I stole my house, I feel conflicted. Edit. The coffee preference is a joke about how I do not like male genitals in my coffee. That is cheating. Not a a-hole. It's your house. It belongs in your family. You did it up for your ex-stepdaughter, which was already an amazing thing you did. But they are not a part of your family anymore, and you have no obligation to help. As heartless as people may find that statement, it's true. Anyone who calls you an a-hole is welcome to help pay to do up your ex's new house to make it more accessible for their daughter. Morally and legally, it's your house. It's a family home passed down by your parents, not your ex's parents. It's legally and morally your home. Even the appellate courts agreed that the lower courts erred in their initial judgment. Also, on the moral side, if he was in a good relationship with a stepdaughter, I could maybe encourage him to think about dropping some financial help to make their new place more accessible. If I divorced and loved my ex-stepkid erased for years, I would, but not on these conditions. The ex-stepdaughter sided with her mother to try and steal his house. She is participating in the online slandering. This is no good. She clearly doesn't care the slightest about Opie, and so I think it's better they all just part ways. I know children can be swayed by their parents, but she is old enough to have a sense of right and wrong. You guys were only married for a few years. Not stay home. They had no reasonable expectation to keep the house when it's been in your family for generations, and you guys were together for a short time. I would suggest that maybe you could provide some money that could go directly to building ramps and such for the daughter in the place they're in now. You don't have to outfit the whole place, but maybe help make some modifications. Yes, I was thinking this. I don't think Opie's the a-hole, but from what I read I didn't see any opinions or bad attitude from the daughter and is innocent in this. Could be wrong. If you have any feelings for her being your stepdaughter, it could mean a lot to her. She may be feeling bad, ashamed and like an inconvenience because she may think this is all her fault. Her disability is causing what is probably a nightmare for her. It's you. It's totally you. Hopefully your moneyed feelings for your house are there for you when no one else wants to be. You admit you could afford to just buy another house, which leads me to ask, why didn't you do that and charge your ex rent? You both would have won, and you would have a clear conscience in your twilight years. But you didn't. Ex aside, you essentially left a disabled person in the snow. Why should Opie spend money to buy a new house and let someone who cheated on him and lied in court live in one he already had? Also, if it did that, it will probably end with the ex making more claims to the house. Now for the last story. Am I the a-hole for telling my brother that his recent breakup was his fault? Despite having a good job, my brother is cheap. A few years ago, he bought a fixer-upper for a reduced price. It was a complete mess, but he moved in and said he would fix it up himself. The house needs more than a few repairs and some paint, and my brother has no renovation experience or skills. The house has no basement stairs. When the hot water tank broke, he couldn't find anyone to fix it because there was no way to get a person and their tools down the rickety ladder. He hasn't had hot water for over 2 years. None of the rooms have doors. The kitchen has no sink. Only one room is painted, and it looks like a 5-year-old did it, and the attic isn't sealed. He uses rainwater to shower and wash his clothes. He has an outhouse in his yard. The house has a functional shower and toilet, but even if he had hot water, he doesn't want to run up his bill. He reuses floss and whatever food he doesn't grow himself. He gets from dumpsters outside restaurants or from the dollar store when it's close to expired. His wardrobe is falling apart because he won't buy new clothing. He refuses to have an air conditioner, and we have many days when it's over 100 degrees and his house gets unbearable. He was engaged, but I don't think she realized the extent until they moved in together. She didn't want a huge white wedding, but my brother wanted to barter to get the license fee paid and didn't want to spend anything on the wedding. His plan was to have a friend get ordained and get married in his yard in clothes they already had and not feed anyone. Just send them home after the vows. No photos besides cell phones once taken by the guests. He wouldn't even entertain the idea of having a barbecue because he said it was too expensive. For her birthday, he got her dad flowers he stole from a funeral home and takeout he got from a dumpster. They only lived together for 3 months before she left. Our parents say it isn't his fault, and his girlfriend wanted material things instead of loving him like he is, and they are blaming her. When he complained to me, he expected me to agree. I said it's not materialistic to want to use electricity instead of flashlights, or use an indoor bathroom or eat food that wasn't from a dumpster. I also said it was insulting to expect people to come to your wedding and act as unpaid photographers, not even feed them. I said the breakup was his fault, not hers. Now he's not talking to me, and our parents expect me to apologize for upsetting him. I refuse to apologize because I believe he is wrong and they are enabling him. I don't think there is anything wrong with being frugal, but my brother is on a different planet. My parents won't stop insisting I'm wrong for mistreating my brother. Should I have just agreed when he complained about the breakup? Tell me, was I wrong for giving an honest opinion? Not stay home. It sounds like your brother has some mental health issues. Nope, there are people like this. Look up extreme cheapskates. If you are in the US, it used to come on TLC. Dumpster divers, eating others' leftovers out of the fridge, begging others for their scraps at restaurants, cooking in the dishwasher, using the pool to wash dishes / clothes or the kids, using tuna cat food instead of tuna for human consumption. There also come cheapskates on live free or die. They live off the grid primarily in the lower US states. They barter, forge, and live on the fringes. Opie's brother is one of these folks. Yes, it is his fault. He needs to be upfront and honest with any future partner. It's not materialistic to want hot water, inside plumbing and electricity. It's not the 1850s frontier. Not stay home. Even living like he is, he's still golden. Tell mom and dad to move in with him since they support him so much. His ex must have really wanted to get married to stay as long as she did. Not stay home. She's not materialistic. She wants common things like hot water and the ability to go into the basement or food that's not from the dumpster. That's unsafe and hazardous. Who would be okay with living like that? That's unacceptable. You're right, Opie. Weird that their definition of materialistic seems to be doesn't want to live in their own filth. Not stay home. There's cheap and thrifty, but this is something else. He needs help. Yep. There's a huge difference between being frugal / thrifty and being miserly. Frugal is not willing to spend $100 for a t-shirt, but will go to a thrift store and pick a good quality t-shirt, and occasionally splurge on something personal like an annual cruise. Buying mostly affordable things without significantly compromising on quality and safety. Miserly is the brother who will do anything and everything to save a penny. Like waiting until clothes become hole-ridden rags before buying a cheap and poor quality $3 t-shirt. And other things despite significant inconvenience in sacrificing personal comfort and safety.